Welcome. As you settle in, close your eyes and let the world grow quiet around you. Allow your mind to wander not to the familiar comforts of the present, but to a time long, long ago. Tonight, we journey back over 4,000 years to the very beginnings of human civilization. The land is hot and dry. The air is thick with dust in the slow, rhythmic calls of animals at dusk. This is Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers, a place of firsts, the first writing, the first cities, the first laws. But this journey isn't about kings or towering ziggurats, at least not yet. It's about you, and what it might have felt like to simply exist. As a person, a laborer, a worker, a soul among many. To wake, to toil, to eat, to sleep beneath a sky ruled by gods, in a world that offered no promises. It might be the cradle of civilization, but it would not have cradled you. Let's begin with why you likely wouldn't last a day in ancient Mesopotamia. The morning sun rises early over the plains of Sumer. There are no roosters here, just the distant groan of a wooden cart, and the splash of sandals through damp canal water. The land is flat, endless, and already warm. You wake on a woven mat, beneath a roof of bundled reeds, the scent of dry clay and river mud lingering from the night. You are not a noble. You are not a priest. You are, like most others, a worker, a digger, a doer. There is no alarm clock. The rhythm of your life is dictated by light and obligation. You rise before dawn, stretching limbs that ache already from yesterday's labor. Breakfast is a dry hunk of emmer bread, rough and fibrous. You chew slowly, more out of necessity than pleasure. A clay bowl of thin, bitter beer waits nearby, low in alcohol, high in calories. It fills your stomach. It does not fill your spirit. Your task today, digging and hauling. A canal's edge has collapsed overnight, likely due to the last flood, and it's your duty, along with a dozen others, to clear the muck and rebuild the wall. You sling baskets of wet earth on your back, again and again. The sun bears down with unrelenting weight, and your sweat smells of clay and effort. The overseer watches. He says little, but his stick says plenty. If he deems your pace too slow, there are a few breaks. When you pause, it is only long enough to gulp water from a communal jar, warm, brackish, and full of grit. You wonder if it's cleaner than the canals. You don't ask. Questions aren't really a thing for you. At midday, you retreat for a short break. In the shade of a crumbling wall, you share a palmful of dried figs with another laborer. He murmurs something about the temple tax being increased again. You nod. This is not surprising. The gods demand, because in Mesopotamia, life isn't just hard, it's watched. Every moment, every action, every misstep is believed to carry divine consequence. You don't get sick because of germs. You get sick because you've angered a god, or forgotten an offering, or stepped in the wrong place during a lunar eclipse. You've already been to the temple 3 times this month. Once to light a reed bundle for Enlil, once to leave a barley offering for Ninhursag, the mother goddess, once just because your neighbor's goat fell ill, and that felt like a bad omen. The priests interpret signs. You obey. Your body aches by late afternoon. Your fingers are lined with dust. Your feet sting from unseen stones in the shallows of the irrigation trench. You trudge home, though home is not much. A squat hut of dried reeds and mud. Inside, it's dark, barely enough space to stretch. The air is thick, unmoving. There is no privacy, no furniture. A pot simmers with lentils and wild onions, edible. You relieve yourself in a trench dug behind the hut. The waste is washed away during flood season. Until then, it lingers. The flies don't mind. Neither do the mosquitoes, which arrive as dusk falls, buzzing, biting, relentless. You eat slowly, quietly. There is no candle, only the flicker of a clay lamp, its flame dancing weakly in the breeze that seeps through the reed walls. Outside, the night hums with the low croak of frogs and distant howls jackals. Perhaps, maybe worse, you don't dwell on it. Before sleep, you whisper a prayer to Shamash, the sun god, not for warmth, but for safety. For another day without injury, without famine, without war. Your bed is the same woven mat. Your blanket, a thin cloth that does little against the grit carried in by the wind. You lie there, listening to the sounds of night, to the breathing of your family, to the slow heartbeat of a civilization in its infancy. Sleep doesn't come easily. Tomorrow, it begins again. Before there were novels, before there were scrolls or books, there was a story, etched in wedge-shaped lines on clay tablets. It is the oldest known epic in human history, a tale of gods and monsters, of grief and ambition, of a man who was also a king, who might have actually existed. His name was Gilgamesh. You likely know the name as myth, but behind the myth, beyond the battles with forest demons and sky gods, lurk hints of something far more human, more fragile, and possibly more real. Let's begin not with a sword, but with a seal. A royal cylinder seal unearthed near Uruk, Gilgamesh's fabled city. It's one of many. These artifacts bear the symbols of kings' names like Bilgames, or Gilgami Vara Gilgami, that suggest the story we now call a myth may have started as a memory. Among mortals, if you were born in Uruk around 2700 BCE, you might have heard whispers of a great ruler. He was said to be two-thirds divine, towering in stature, impossible to ignore. But the Epica reveals a darker portrait. Gilgamesh was no hero to begin with. In the oldest versions, he's a tyrant. He takes what he wants, ignores his people's cries, and exercises divine right with a heavy hand. The people pray for help not to him, but against him. And the gods answer. They send a rival, a man of nature, a beast in human form. Born wild, covered in hair, he drinks with animals and runs with gazelles. But he is tamed not by swords or shackles, but by love. A woman, a priestess, brings him into the human world with touch and song. She teaches him speech, thought, and from wild man, he becomes man Gilgamesh. And Enkidu fight, but neither wins. And so, they become ... friends. Adventures, monsters, and the great grief. Their adventures read like the world's first buddy movie until they don't. They journey to the cedar forest to fight a monstrous guardian. They kill him. They slay the bull of heaven, sent by the scorned goddess Ishtar, after Gilgamesh refuses her romantic advances. And then ... comes punishment. The gods decide that someone must die. Enkidu falls ill. He withers slowly. Gilgamesh, who has never before lost, cannot understand. His grief is not gentle. It is seismic. He rages. He weeps. He wanders. From there, the epic changes tone. The first existential crisis in literature now. Gilgamesh seeks something far greater than glory. He seeks immortality. He crosses deserts, slays lions, walks through the mountains where the sun sleeps. He reaches the immortal flood survivor, Utnapishtim. Utnapishtim tells him, "You can't." He tells him a story of flood sent by the gods to destroy mankind, and how he was chosen to survive. The gods granted him eternal life, but it was a one-time gift. Still, Gilgamesh tries. He's told of a plant that restores youth. He finds it, and then it's stolen by a snake while he sleeps. He returns home to Uruk, older, Sedar, human, and that's how the epic ends, not with a battle, but with a walk along the walls of his city. He says, "Look at this city. I built this, that." The real kings of Uruk. Archaeologists have found a king. List an ancient Sumerian document, listing rulers who reigned for impossibly long times. Among them is Gilgamesh, marked as a king of Uruk, who reigned for 126 years. We know this isn't literal, but it suggests something else, that behind the legend was a leader remembered, one whose deeds, good or terrible, etched themselves onto memory, until memory became myth. His story, preserved in broken tablets and fragments across time, still whispers to us today. But because he was mortal and didn't want to be. Imagine a room. It is dim, windowless, and warm with the breath of oil lamps. In the center is a boy, maybe 12 years old. His fingers are stained with clay. In front of him lies a small, flat tablet, soft and smooth, like dough. He takes a reed stylus and begins to press, wedge by wedge, line by line. This is not art. It's accounting, but is also ... history. These markings are known as cuneiform, from the Latin cuneus, meaning wedge. It's the earliest known system of writing, and it began not to tell stories, but to count things: barley, goats, taxes, and beer. In a world of rising cities and kings, record-keeping was survival. From barley to epics, the first tablets date back to around 3200 BCE, long before alphabets or papyrus. They used pictures at first, tiny, crude images to symbolize what was being counted: a sheep, a jug, a head. But as time passed, writing evolved into something richer. The Sumerians discovered that, with just a few shapes, rearranged in clever ways, they could write anything, from myth to law to dreams. Soon, scribes were trained not just in how to form the symbols, but how to interpret them. To become a scribe was to hold power. You could write contracts, dictate land deals, serve kings, please gods, tell stories, tablet libraries and lost rooms in the ruins of Nineveh. Archaeologists uncovered a wonder. Over 30,000 tablets buried beneath centuries of sand and war. Inside were myths, legal codes, medical recipes, lists of omens, hymns, royal decrees, mathematical puzzles, and letters. Some were written by scholars, others were student practice tablets, still bearing teacher corrections. Too sloppy, even in antiquity. There was homework, but many tablets remain they sit in drawers, museum basements, and climate-controlled vaults around the world. Some have cracks that make them unreadable. Others are written in dialects we barely understand. Some seem to contain gibberish, or is it poetry or dreams? There's one especially mysterious genre, the incantation tablet, whispered spells and curses. Some tablets weren't meant for public eyes at all. They were buried beneath doorways, hidden in walls, or worn as amulets. Their wedge marks call upon gods to protect homes from spirits, or to curse enemies with disease. Some invoke ghosts. Others describe demons with bird-like faces and lion feet. These weren't fables. To the ancients, these were real threats. You might find a tablet buried in the corner of a house with text like, "May the fever that bites flesh take him. May the night demon cover his mouth." These were fears given shape and the language of clay, unlike papyrus or parchment. Clay is almost indestructible. A library fire would erase scrolls, but it would bake tablets solid, preserving them for eternity. That's why we can still read the Epic of Gilgamesh. Why we know Sumerian riddles. Why we have invoices for beer shipments from 3,500 years ago. And why some tablets, once lost in palace ruins, now sit in quiet museums still whispering names no one has spoken aloud for millennia. Some are short, others are long. Some are factual, others seem to dream. All of them, when read slowly, softly, almost slippily, feel like echoes of the first human thoughts we ever dared to preserve. The courtyard is quiet now. Somewhere far off, a clay lamp flickers out. A priest murmurs a final chant beneath his breath. A breeze sighs between the temple columns, stirring dust that has not moved in days. You lie still, curled beneath the stars. The sounds of the city have faded. No more sandals slapping against stone. No more animals braying. No more haggling voices by the gate. Just the hush of a world built from mud and fire. Slowly exhaling. Above you, the ziggurat stands like a stairway for dreams. They say it reaches toward the gods. But from down here, it looks more like a monument to memory, layer upon layer, brick upon brick, built not just for worship, but to be remembered. You wonder how many have stood where you are now, lay where you now lie. How many hands touch these stones? How many prayers have soaked into this dust, whispered by voices who feared drought, or sickness, or the gods' silence? And yet, the world did not stop. The sun rose, the barley grew, children laughed, scribes carved, fishermen cast their nets. Even in hardship, even when the gods were quiet, people carried on. Just like you. Somewhere in the dark, a reed flute begins to play. A soft tune, repetitive, simple. It is not for celebration. It is not for mourning. It is simply to be played. You close your eyes. You are not a king, not a priest, not a hero carved in stone. But you were here. You toiled. You tasted bitter beer. You whispered to the wind. You dreamt beneath the stars of Uruk, or Babylon, or Lagash. That is enough. That is history. And now, as the river flows past the city walls, and the lamp oil burns low, and the gods rest behind golden doors, you sleep. The cradle of civilization sleeps with you. Good night.